Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Thursday, December the 26th. And welcome to our commentary. They call this day, December 26th, they call it Boxing Day in England. I have friends from England who told me about this. They call it Boxing Day. I had no idea why. It may be that this is when they put things back in the box or they take it out of the box. I'm not sure why they call it Boxing Days, but that's what they call it. So if you're watching us in England, and I know there's a couple of viewers in England because I've seen the numbers. So if you're watching us in England, happy Boxing Day. And I hope you had everybody, I hope everybody had a very nice, wonderful Christmas here in everywhere, wherever you're watching us, US or wherever you're watching us. I hope that everybody had a very nice day. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about the backlash of the commutations, President Biden's commutations. I'm sure you know that President Biden decided to commute the sentence of about 37 pretty bad criminals. These are not people who had been, accused of an injustice or whose trial or conviction had been controversial or anything like that. I mean, these were very bad people who committed some awful things, and they were found guilty by a jury, and that jury convicted them. And President Biden has decided to commute those sentences and somehow, basically go around people, go around the not just the voters, but the members of these juries who decided the way they decided. Look, I think this is a huge mistake by President Biden. If he all of a sudden has had, as I mentioned in my post, if he all of a sudden has had a change of heart when it comes to the death penalty, okay, that's fine. But then he should do it for everybody, not just for these 37. But obviously, these 37, for whatever reason, where their sentences were commuted, if that's the right word, I think it's commutations, or where they're reduced. And I just think it's a huge mistake for the president to do that. If he doesn't like the death penalty, is all of a sudden, he is no longer interested in the death penalty. Okay, fine. He can make that change, or he can have that change of heart. But somehow it seems to me to do it this way and to terrorize really the families of these people, the victims, the families of these victims who've been living with this horrible tragedy. And again, some of these crimes are really bad crimes. The president himself, in a statement that he put out, said that he finds their crimes to be abhorrent. Okay, but he's decided to, engage in commutations for about 37 of them. I don't know why only 37 if he's now all of a sudden opposed to the death penalty. Maybe there are more. There are more coming. I don't know. But I think it was a huge mistake. And you're going around the will of juries. You're also going around the legal system. These people were found guilty, and there's no evidence that any of them, that there was anything wrong with their trials or any accusations that justice was denied or anything like that. It was simply a decision by the president to engage in these kinds of commutations. I just think it's horrible. And I think it does a great deal of harm to his legacy, more than anything else, especially after the pardon for his son, Hunter Biden. Didn't go over very well either. Well, I'm sure you've been listening to President Trump talk about the Panama Canal. I have a post coming out about this tomorrow morning, Friday morning, where I'm talking that, what President Trump is really talking about here is China. Not really talking about the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is simply the way of having a conversation about China. But what he's talking about is what's going on with China in Latin America. There's a very interesting article that came out today in the Dallas Morning News in the editorial, not the editorial section, but right next to it, there's a page called Viewpoints. And there's a very interesting article that came out by a lady named Guevara, who was a Latin American foreign policy specialist. And she's talking about the influence of China in Latin America and how China is just investing money everywhere. I mean, everywhere they have an opportunity, they're investing money. They're investing money in infrastructure. For example, in the case of Peru, they are building a huge port that will not only have commercial implications, but conceivably have military implications as well. A port of that size on the Pacific side of the American continent is, a serious thing in terms of national security, considering that China is also expanding its blue water navy, as they like to call it. Then you have you've heard about electrical vehicles being manufactured in Mexico. And now the Panama Canal, which is run, at least a portion of it, is run by a Chinese company. Look, the Panama Canal has been there for over 100 years. It's always been critical to commercial traffic. It's also important, obviously, from a national security standpoint, to have that, that opening there for our military ships to go Pacific, Atlantic in a much shorter time than obviously having to go around the entire continent. So it is not just a commercial thing; it's also a national security thing. And I think Trump is sending out a message through the canal to countries in Latin America and to China as well, that things are going to change, and that countries are going to have to take into account Chinese influence and what impact that could have on their relationships with the United States. And I think when you take President Trump, and then very likely going to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I think you're going to have a different approach. I think you're going to have a different approach, American approach, to the countries in Latin America when it comes to China. So I'm glad that President Trump is talking about it. I'm glad that this is an issue, and I'm glad that he means to make it an issue in his second presidency. I think we need it. We need to have a discussion of exactly how much, and we also need to have this discussion with the countries in Latin America as to, who do you want to do business with? Do you want to do business with Latin America, or would you rather do business with the U.S.? Now, nothing stops the U.S., of course, from doing business with them. And maybe we should be promoting more trade agreements with countries. I'm all for that. I'm all for trade agreements. But clearly, the influence of China has to be seen as a potential national security threat to the United States, and the canal, especially, is foremost on that list. By the way, if you have been reading about what's happened to the cable news stations, and I don't keep up with this all the time, but it is interesting from time to time, to read what's happening to their ratings. What you're seeing is a tremendous collapse in the ratings of CNN and MSNBC. And many people are asking the question, where are the viewers going? Where are they going? I mean, these viewers have all of a sudden decided to shut off CNN and MSNBC, and they're losing some huge numbers in terms of audience. Now, the last article that I saw said that 3/4 of all of the people watching cable news are watching Fox News. Now, that doesn't mean that Fox has had a huge increase in ratings. It went up compared to the other two. But I think overall, what I'm sensing out of all of this is that Democrats and liberals were so turned off by the election that they just simply turned off their favorite channels. And I think, on the other hand, some of them have decided to go to Fox. So Fox has increased their numbers a little bit. But I think overall, there's a warning here for the cable news stations, and that is that the days of cable news getting huge ratings are probably over, and that the cable news audience maybe wants a different kind of programming, maybe more programming, like we're seeing in some of these podcasts, where you're getting a lot more serious conversation about what's happening in the country, instead of just simply reading talking points or headlines or repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Maybe the cable news viewer wants to have a little bit more substance. I don't know. I mean, I don't watch Fox News that much, partly because of my schedule more than anything else. But I do, from time to time, watch some of the clips that appear on the internet of some of the interviews and programs there, and most of them I like. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. Honestly, there's nothing there that appeals to me. I mean, they're always so partisan and so crazy, especially MSNBC. Some of the stuff coming out of MSNBC, it's just absolutely sickening. So I don't really watch it that much, but I have become a fan of podcasts. And there are some really interesting podcasts that are going around. And I know in the next year, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite podcasts, some of the ones that I'm almost listening to every day. I love Hugh Hewitt. Now, that's not technically a podcast, but I love his show. I love the O'Reilly show, the new one that he's been running for several years. It's truly a very good one. Then there's one called PBD, which is a group of men who talk about the news and offer commentary. That's a really good one. And there's others. And as I say, I'm going to be putting them together in a list and talking to you after the first of the year. We'll talk a little bit more about them, because I do think that's where the industry needs to go. They need to go into more substance-oriented coverage and a lot less of the partisan coverage that cable news has sort of grown accustomed to. Cable news became too partisan. And I think that's why it took away more serious people who just don't want to sit there all day long hearing how bad Trump is or how great Trump is. I think there is an audience in between of people who say, okay, don't tell me that Trump is terrible. Don't tell me that he walks on water. Let's maybe have a discussion about the issues. And I think that more and more people seem to be going in that direction. And that explains, I think, the success of many of these podcasts that are getting huge audiences. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the ones that I've seen on YouTube, some of these audiences, like 100,000, 200,000 viewers that these podcasts are getting. So that's some pretty big numbers. And that, of course, translates into some influence, if you will, over our political system. Just a quick note here as we close. On this day in 1991, what we used to call the Soviet Union basically ceased to exist. The Soviet Union was dissolved. I think it was effective at the end of the year. And the Soviet Union became Russia. And if you remember, there was a fellow by the name of Yeltsin who became the leader of Russia, the president of Russia. And he basically took over in 1992. And Gorbachev, who was the leader of the old Soviet Union, well, he kind of went away with the old Soviet Union. So Russia was the word on this day back in 1991, when the USSR ceased to exist and Russia came back as the name of the country that it's still Russia today. So that happened on this day in 1991. And I remember that. You know, that whole thing, you know, the flag going down and the Russian flag going up. I remember that. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.